Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are. Hello, thank you for watching my videos. It's Mike. It's October 18th, 2009. Here are some of the interesting news stories I've been reading. General Electric, of course, last week announced that their profits have fallen a dramatic amount, 45%, mainly based on rising property loans that are going bad. So the whole real estate market is starting to move and affect companies like General Electric. This should be interesting. Now, one of the other stories that I read today was General Electric looks to build £200 million wind farm plant in the UK. So after Vestas left the Isle of Wight because it was too inefficient, they weren't having any sales in Europe, blah 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 blah. General Electric decides that actually we figure there's going to be quite a market in Europe and the UK for wind farms, and General Electric are going to be building a plant and a research and development site. I wonder if someone in Vestas has pissed off someone in European government. Anyway, one of the videos that's been passed around a lot on YouTube in the last few days is this thing, Obama poised to cede US sovereignty, etc., etc. They're talking about the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the treaty that's currently being bashed out. There's a meeting occurring in December in Copenhagen where they're hopefully going to work out the final text of the treaty. Now, unfortunately, for those people who feel that this is actually instituting a world government, it's still going to take some time before this treaty can be ratified by the various countries around the world. And in particular in the States, the treaty can only be officially ratified if 2/3 of the Senate vote for it. Now, at the moment, the Democrats hold 60% of the Senate seats, so it is unlikely they can get the additional 7% out of Republicans unless there's some serious arm twisting going on. And indeed, hopefully, the senators will recognize that they're giving up an awful lot in this particular treaty. Now, I've included a bunch of articles in it. I've also included the working text of the treaty, reordering and consolidation of text in the revised negotiating text. I've linked this here from the United Nations pages. Now, a lot of this came about from this site that I've linked here called Foxy News, Debbie's blog, where she goes into great detail about some of the things that are in this treaty. Now, this is a negotiating text. They're currently working on the words, and in fact, if you look at it, they really can't decide if they want to use the word shall or should quite a bit. Of course, shall in legal terms means you are not totally obligated to do it, whereas shall means you are totally obligated to do it, whereas should means you can weasel your way out of it if you wish. So we'll see what happens. Now, in the Financial Times this morning, and also on Reuters, US and Britain say the global climate deal is now possible, but it probably won't be successfully agreed upon in December unless something unusual happens in the economy and political situation. The biggest stumbling block for US and Britain was the fact that a lot of the terms in the treaty were about transfer of technology, so basically giving the technology to developing countries to reduce their carbon footprint. Basically, working around the patents and everything, so that people that invented the stuff wouldn't get paid. They've agreed to take that wording out, and what will happen is the developed countries will now be working in partnership with the developing countries on the carbon capture nonsense. We'll see what happens. Of course, Debbie's blog goes into the fact that one of the things is that Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth is full of lies. Who knew? There's at least 20 scientific inconsistencies and outright lies in that presentation. Okay, so a little bit further along, I've also included a link to the FT's in-depth coverage of the Copenhagen Climate Conference. Down in, up in Nottinghamshire, Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station. The climate camp people have been up there, basically protesting this coal-fired electricity plant that's up there. It's one of the biggest generators of carbon dioxide in the United Kingdom. Even with all the filtering and cleaning that they're doing, it's still pumping out tons and tons of carbon dioxide. So the climate camp people have been up there. Some of those splintered off and managed to have little tussles with the police. but in general, the majority of the crowd was seriously peaceful and just wanted people to get behind it. They had somewhere in the order of 1,000 people turn up, which is quite a good showing. Now, one of the things I came across this week was somebody passed me this. SDR makes official appearance on USPS Customs Form. And I thought, well, that's kind of peculiar. USPS, United States Postal Service. And what's an SDR? That's the special drawing rights. This is the currency of the International Monetary Fund. Now, a lot of the articles that I've linked previously about SDRs and IMF and all this stuff indicate that it's not yet a real currency. Nobody uses it for anything. The United States Postal Service does. On their little customs form, declaration form, you have to fill out the SDR value of anything that you're shipping. Now, this was a form that was sent to me. This received when my viewer sent the sword. So I thought, well, that's really bizarre. How long has the U.S. Postal Service been using SDRs for their international currency transactions? Since 2003. So for the last 6 years, the United States Postal Service, and most likely other parts of the U.S. government, have been using special drawing rights to settle their international currency transactions. Not a real currency, huh? Of course, it's only for governments at this point and sovereigns, but who knows, may eventually come filtering down to us. A couple of other quick stories. Mexico shuts down inefficient power utility. I've linked this here. This is from the Financial Times, but there's a number of other articles out there if you can't get into the FT site. Bank failures near 100 for the year. Basically, you had the 99th bank fail in the States on Friday, a bank in California. That's not the only banks that are failing around the world. In Holland, the Dutch bank DSB has been put in administration to halt a run on deposits. This was last weekend. They've spent the week trying to sort out this bank. They basically stopped everyone withdrawing money from it. Dutch court now gives them more time for a deal. Apparently there's a US bidder coming in who's going to try and buy the bank. We'll see what happens. The post office in England. Now, one of the things about the post office in England is it isn't just the post office. You can actually do money transfers and all kinds of weird things there. They're also a financial institution. But they're not a financial institution themselves. They actually resell services for other banks. In particular, Bank of Ireland, a couple of Irish banks are behind it. And what they're doing is now setting up a mortgage department. So you'll be able to get a mortgage for your house from the post office, but it's actually coming from Ireland. Now, what about Ireland? What's been happening over there since they signed, agreed to the Lisbon Treaty? Said yes. Ireland's choice, 4 billion euros in cuts or the IMF. Essentially, the Irish government is now saying, okay, we have to cut services dramatically. We're going to need to cut 4 billion from the annual budget, 4 billion euros. Otherwise, the IMF is going to have to come in and run the place because it's a complete mess. It seriously is messed up in Ireland. And of course the Lisbon Treaty again, article here, Blair for president, not necessarily a good idea. One thing that's been going on is the Lisbon Treaty was held up in final ratification by the Czech Republic, by the president of the Czech Republic. He has softened his stance this week after the EU threatened to remove the Czech Republic's European Commission seat if he didn't sign. So guess what? He's going to sign. So we're going to have a new European Union. There'll be a single entity instead of three, and we will have a president of Europe. Now, will it be Tony Blair? Possibly. There are 4 other candidates that are being put forward. We'll see what the European legislations or the European Commission decides. The EU turns up heat on bailed out banks, UK and Ireland. German coalition parties see deal within next week. EU competition chief readies rulings on bank bailouts. Now basically the European Union Competition Office has said that the governments can't put this much money into the banks because effectively they're making the banks less competitive than other banks that haven't received bailouts. So a lot of the banks in Ireland, UK, Germany, etc., across Europe that have received bailouts are having to sell off some of their assets, split themselves off, sell off parts of them of their organizations, so that they aren't such huge monopolies. This is going to have interesting effects. Lloyd's has been seriously shorted near the end of the week. A lot of investors expect Lloyd's to run into trouble next week. Now, of course, the WebBot project, Half Past Human, has been predicting that from the period of around October 25th through beginning of November, there will be a US dollar currency collapse. Who knows what the trigger is going to be? It could be any of these things. Now, excuse me, one of the other things, of course, is that the Germany coalition parties see deal within next week. So basically, a lot of the problems with the German banks are being hidden. And they're being hidden until the German government, this coalition government, works out all the various things they want to do and how they're going to do it before they actually start talking in Parliament, etc., and then actually start bringing these things up. Now, there was an institute of major economists from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland that came out with a report on Thursday. Now, the government in Germany is really playing up the fact that they're predicting that the gross domestic product of Germany will improve 1.2% in 2010, which is not very much, but it's better than a decline. However, what the economists were actually saying was that great risks still exist. The financial crisis is far from over. The credit crunch is still occurring. German banks are not loaning out money like they should be. And there is a serious risk that things could go terribly wrong yet again. Never mind. And final piece, something I read in The Guardian yesterday. It is too late to shut the door on GM foods. Now, one of the things about living in England and Europe is genetically modified foods aren't really allowed. That's the phone. I'll continue this in a sec. So sorry about that, I had to take the call. It was my mum. Couldn't really ignore her. So anyway, as I was saying, GM foods. In Europe and England, you're not allowed to actually have genetically modified foods, or you're not allowed to grow them there. And if there are genetically modified foods coming into the country, they have to be clearly labeled on the packaging that this contains GM foods. Well, unfortunately, majority of the soya that's actually produced in the world is from genetically modified seeds. And in fact, pulling up the article here, the amount of GM seeds that are actually out there is absolutely astounding. There's basically 6 companies control the majority of the genetically modified foods. They control 3/4 of the global agrochemical market. 3 companies now control nearly half of the total global market in proprietary seeds, worth $22 billion a year. Monsanto accounted for nearly 1/4 of the total global market, 23%, followed by DuPont and Swiss headquartered Syngenta. So, yeah, basically, they're going out there and they're patenting these seeds, an insane amount. Intellectual property rights have been applied to 82% of the global seed market. It's insane. Anyway, peace, love, understanding, think about things. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye.